Imagine waking up one morning and realizing that reality isn't what it seems. Strange flashes of light, ghostly hums, and cosmic signals defy every explanation we have, and sometimes make scientists scratch their heads. In this video, we are diving into real phenomena, true, documented events that feel like glitches in the Matrix. These aren't fairy tales or folklore, but actual mysteries of science and nature that no one has fully solved. Buckle up and get ready for a wild ride through the weirdest corners of reality. In the 1970s, a classified UK military experiment known as Project Hess allegedly documented multiple cases of soldiers vanishing for several minutes at a time from sealed, secure rooms. The men would reappear exactly where they vanished with no recollection of what happened, only confusion and nausea. Internal memos, declassified decades later, described the disappearances as, quote, brief temporal dislocations and caution about exposure to certain radio frequencies. No official explanation was ever made public, and the files were quietly buried again in the early 2000s. During early high-energy collisions at CERN's Large Hadron Collider, atomic clocks monitoring the site began to show minuscule but measurable discrepancies. Scientists noted in some tests clocks located near the collider would shift by fractions of a microsecond compared to those further away. This should not happen. Time dilation on that scale requires massive gravity or velocity. Some speculated that these could be miniature time slips caused by high-energy distortions, possibly even evidence of quantum-level glitches. CERN never formally claimed a malfunction of reality, but they did recalibrate every monitoring system afterward. In 2013, users on Reddit and Google Earth forums began reporting something strange. A small German town appeared as usual on Google Earth one day, then disappeared completely the next. Zooming in showed empty green space where buildings had been. Coordinates still worked, but all satellite imagery was gone. Then, 24 hours later, the town reappeared fully intact. Google never addressed the glitch, and there's no public record of map maintenance that day, so was it a software bug, or did reality briefly blink? During a solar eclipse in Zambia in 2022, astronomers and amateur photographers captured something they couldn't explain: a black dot hovering over the center of the sun for exactly 2.3 seconds. Not part of the moon, not a sunspot, just a void. Photos confirmed it, but live video feeds from the same locations showed nothing. Satellite logs from ESA and NASA recorded a momentary dip in light data as if something absorbed the sun's radiation completely. Some dubbed it a data void. Others wonder if we briefly saw something not meant for us to see. In 2007, Lost Lake in Oregon mysteriously vanished. It happens actually every few years. The entire lake drains within 48 hours. But where does the water go? Geologists discovered a large hole at the bottom believed to be a lava tube from past volcanic activity, but even with that explanation, something just doesn't really add up. GPS mapping shows the volume of water disappearing is far greater than what a lava tube could handle, and it never floods nearby. It just vanishes. Scientists admit they have no complete model for what is going on here. In 1908, something exploded over the Siberian wilderness so violently that it flattened 800 square miles of forest, an area larger than the entire city of London. The shockwave knocked people off their feet hundreds of miles away, but when investigators arrived, they found nothing. No crater, no meteorite, just trees snapped in a radial pattern, some burned from the inside out. To this day, scientists still don't know what caused it. Was it a comet, a black hole, a pocket of antimatter? Whatever it was, it left behind one of the most powerful and unexplained events in Earth's history.
This one comes out of Berkshire County, Massachusetts, back in September 1st of 1969. That night, dozens of people claimed to have seen strange lights in the sky over Sheffield. Some described them as being attached to a disc-shaped craft, and even stranger, a lot of witnesses said they couldn't account for chunks of time after watching it. It wasn't just like, I saw lights and went home. People felt like something really happened to them. One of the most talked about witnesses is Thomas Reed. He was only 9 at the time, riding in a car with his mom, brother, and grandmother. He said they first saw glowing orbs shoot out from the trees along the road. When they got near the Sheffield Bridge, things got even weirder. It came to a stop off the right side of the road. Everything got really calm. It was like being in the middle of a hurricane. There was like a barometric change in pressure. It was just like a dead silence. Then there was an eruption of crickets and frogs, and it got really loud, and that was it, end quote. Next thing they knew, they were back in the car, but 2 hours had passed. His mom and grandmother had even switched seats, and no one could explain how. Reed later said they regained flashes of memory about being inside some massive hangar with curved hallways, and other people were there too. As for where they were, who the hell knows? This next story was shared by a now deleted Reddit user and goes as follows. Okay, I don't really know how to explain this without sounding insane, but I've been thinking about it for years and I still can't make sense of it. Back in 2016, I was driving home from my job around 2 a.m. I live in a small town, so the roads are usually dead quiet at that time. There's one stretch of highway I always take that goes past a gas station, then about a 15-minute straight before I hit my exit. Well, this time though, something was off. I passed the gas station like usual, but when I looked at the digital clock in my car, it said 2:17. I swear it had been 2:04 the last time I checked. Right as I passed the station, that stretch of road normally takes 15 minutes, but somehow it felt like it just skipped. I don't remember zoning out, I don't remember seeing anything weird. It was just like the time jumped forward and I was closer to home than I should have been. The creepier part is the gas station itself. For a couple months after that, whenever I drove by it, the lights were off. The pumps were wrapped in yellow tape and the sign was taken down. When I asked a coworker about it, they told me that gas station has been shut down for years, but I know I stopped there plenty of times and I definitely remember seeing it open that night. I don't have proof, I know it sounds like bad memory or whatever, but I can't shake the feeling that I've somehow crossed into a place where things aren't exactly the same. On October 11th, 1973, 2 guys from Mississippi, Calvin Parker and Charles Hickson, went out night fishing in the Pascagoula River. It was supposed to be a quiet evening, but then Parker noticed blue lights hitting the water. At first he figured it was the cops telling them to pack it up, but what came next was nothing close to that. A big light came out of the clouds. Parker later said it was a blinding light. It was hard to tell with the lights so bright, but it looked like it was shaped like a football, about 80 foot. It made a very loud sound. It was just a hissing noise, end quote. Then 3 strange floating creatures came out of the craft. They didn't have legs, and Parker said they had mitten-shaped claws. One was gray and didn't have a neck. Another looked more feminine. When one of them reached for Parker, instead of panicking, he suddenly felt calm. I think they injected us with something to calm us. I was kind of numb and went along with the program, he said. Both men claimed they were pulled aboard the craft and examined. Hickson remembered. There were no seats, no chain. They just moved me around and I couldn't resist them. I just floated, felt no sensation, no pain. He also described a giant eye-like machine scanning them. He reported everything to the sheriff that night, and deputies secretly recorded them afterward, expecting them to slip up. Instead, they caught the men whispering in fear. Jesus Christ, God have mercy, they had us. They could have done anything to us, Hickson said. For decades, Parker stayed mostly quiet, only writing a book in 2018 after Hickson's death, and that's when other locals came forward saying they saw something strange in the sky that very same night. In 1957, a Brazilian farmer named Antonio Villas-Boas claimed he was abducted by aliens. Working late in his fields to avoid the heat, he said he saw a red star approaching, which turned out to be an egg-shaped craft with a rotating red light. Boas alleged that 5-foot-tall beings in gray overalls and helmets captured him and took him aboard, where he was subjected to blood tests and a strange gas that made him violently ill. He also claimed a female alien engaged with him intimately and indicated she would raise their child in space. 4 hours later, he was released and watched as the craft just flew back up into the sky. A lot of people obviously dismissed his story, but a man named Dr. Olavo Fontes noted Boas had burns, bruising, and nausea. Boas later became a lawyer, but he never shook this incident. He'd often craft models of the UFO he claimed to have seen, and he stuck to his story till his death in 1991. During World War I in 1915, Australian and New Zealand soldiers fighting at Gallipoli reported one of the strangest disappearances in wartime history. According to eyewitness accounts, the 4th Norfolk Regiment marched into a low-lying mist on the battlefield and just never came out. The soldiers who watched claimed they, expected to see the men re-emerge on the other side in moments, but the fog seemed to just swallow them whole. When the war ended, their bodies were never recovered, and the regiment was officially listed as missing. In total, 267 men went missing. Some skeptics argue that men may have been captured by Ottoman forces or killed in ways that just left no trace, use your imagination. But to many, the story of an entire regiment disappearing into a cloud seems to suggest something much stranger, as if the fog itself was a doorway to another world. In the tiny village of Eidsborg, Norway, locals whisper about a stretch of country road that does not behave like a normal road. Travelers claim that when driving late at night, the road seems to shift under them. Instead of leading them home, it appears to bend and curve into woods or meadows that shouldn't exist. In the 50s, 2 farmers who'd spent the evening drinking at a tavern set off along this road with their horse and cart. They never arrived at their destination. Days later, the horse and cart were found abandoned in the middle of the road. The men themselves were nowhere to be found. No footprints led away, no signs of a struggle were there. Some believe they may have stumbled into a bog or river, but others say the road itself could have opened up into another place, and the men just drove off the map. High in the Indian Himalayas at the base of the Pindari Glacier is a small settlement where strange stories have been told for centuries. Travelers who hike the glacier often report hearing voices in the fog. Sometimes the voices are familiar, calling out the names of friends or family members, but those who step toward the sound often disappear. In one especially haunting case, a British officer in the early 1900s was said to have chased a woman dressed in white along the trail. His men followed behind but eventually lost sight of him. The only thing they found was his walking stick resting on a rock. He was never seen again. Villagers believe the glacier hides a passage to another side of existence and avoid traveling near it at night. To them, the fog is alive, luring victims into another world. Beneath the University of York lies the Heslington Tunnel, a long abandoned underground passage that students in the 60s once used for dares. The tunnel quickly gained a reputation after one disturbing story. 2 students ventured in late one night, determined to prove how brave they were. Only one came back out though. The survivor claimed that halfway through his friend stopped walking, got all pale, and then faded away right in front of him, as if the air itself had swallowed him whole. Police searched every inch of the tunnel, because they didn't believe the kid of course, but they found no trace of this missing student. Eventually the university sealed the tunnel off, but stories are still around. People still report hearing voices echoing beyond the walls, as though those who vanished are still trapped down there, waiting to be heard. The Mojave Desert is littered with abandoned mine shafts that stretch for miles underground. Explorers often warn never to go in, and for good reason. In the 1990s, a group of amateur spelunkers entered one shaft near Death Valley. Hours later, they came back confused and disoriented, claiming to have lost track of time. Their watches all displayed different hours, like each one had been traveling in a separate timeline. Then in 2014, another explorer went missing while filming inside a shaft. His camera recorded the descent before abruptly cutting out. Rescue teams later recovered his gear, but the man himself was gone, without a trace. Some say collapses or toxic gases have been the cause. Others argue that the mines are far older than they appear, possibly connecting to places beyond our understanding. Reunion Island, located in the Indian Ocean, is covered with volcanic rock. Beneath the surface is sprawling lava tubes carved by ancient eruptions. In the 1800s, these caves were said to have provided shelter for enslaved people fleeing plantations. Many who fled inside were never seen again. Even today, modern cavers report hearing distant chanting echoing through the tunnels, or seeing lights far below where no human should be. In 1989, 2 experienced explorers vanished during an expedition into one of the deeper tubes. The ropes were later found severed, cut so cleanly that experts couldn't tell how it happened. No bodies were ever found. Local legend insists the lava tubes are more than just caves though. They are a doorway into an underworld that doesn't seem to belong to Mars.
Late at night near Marfa, Texas, locals and tourists have reported seeing balls of light dancing just above the desert floor. Called the Marfa lights, these glowing orbs, often the size of basketballs and colored white, blue, yellow, or red, appear completely out of nowhere. Witnesses say the lights can merge together, split apart, hover in the air, or zip off into the distance. What makes it creepier is that they only show up about a dozen nights a year, with no pattern in sight. The first known sighting was in 1883, and the legends grew from ghosts of Spanish explorers to secret alien bases. Scientists have weighed in with more down-to-earth ideas, maybe heated air layers bending distant car headlights, a mirage called a fata morgana, or swirls of methane gas igniting. Some physics students even filmed headlights and got similar glows. Yet even with these theories, no one can completely explain why the lights behave so oddly. There are nights when folks line up with cameras and see nothing, only for the sky to erupt in orbs the next. Scientists still admit nobody knows for sure what they are. The Marfa lights remain a true frontier of mystery, a shimmering glitch on the highway to the underworld. We think of the moon as dead and lifeless sometimes, but one mystery suggests it still holds secrets. Spacecraft orbiting the moon have detected strong, localized magnetic fields locked in some lunar rocks, especially on the far side. That's weird because today the moon has no global magnetic field or active core like Earth does. Some magnetism was expected from billions of years ago when the moon was molten inside, but the amounts on the far side just don't add up. Why are certain patches of lunar soil so strongly magnetized? A team from MIT recently suggested that a gigantic asteroid impact billions of years ago might have blasted the moon with a cloud of plasma and shock waves, magnetizing rocks across the globe. Their computer models show this could explain some of the anomalies on the far side, but even with that theory, the moon's magnetic map has, quote, large parts still unexplained. In other words, nobody has the complete answer yet. The moon seems to be playing a cosmic shell game with magnetism, leaving geologists scratching their heads. It's not a glitch you'd see with your eyes, but a hidden quirk in the moon's memory. And until we bring back more samples, the full story is still up in the air. In March 2014, Malaysia Airlines flight MH370 vanished with 239 people on board. That part is very well known. But what's lesser known is an alternative theory involving the US military base on Diego Garcia, an extremely remote island in the Indian Ocean. Some data suggested the flight veered off course and flew for hours before vanishing a second time, this time near where Diego Garcia is located. Adding to the mystery, multiple people, including a US-based tech worker named Philip Wood, allegedly sent messages from their phones after the disappearance. Wood's supposed message, posted online days later, claimed he was being held on Diego Garcia and included metadata that some claimed pointed to the island. While many dismissed this as a hoax, others were stunned by the implications. There's no confirmed explanation, and the US has never acknowledged anything unusual, but here's the glitch. How did a commercial flight vanish from modern radar, ping satellites for hours, and possibly transmit data from a military zone? Whether the metadata was faked or not, the story stirred paranoia worldwide. It feels like a window into a shadowy corner of our world where time, truth, and tracking technology all failed at once. In the 1970s, a man named Derek Smith was walking near the abandoned RAF Montrose airfield in Scotland when he said he witnessed something out of time. He reported seeing a vintage aircraft, a World War I biplane, approach the field and begin to land. As the plane touched down, the vision faded. The sight was so vivid that Smith later researched the airfield's history and discovered that a pilot named Lieutenant Desmond Arthur had died in a biplane crash there in 1913. What makes this story more chilling is that it wasn't an isolated incident. Over the years, other visitors visitors to RAF Montrose have described similar sightings, a ghostly plane circling, phantom engines humming, and even full apparitions of early 20th century airmen walking the field. Some theories suggest a quote, time slip, a localized distortion where moments from the past replay in our present. Unlike typical ghost stories, these sightings were investigated by historians and even Air Force personnel who confirmed the area's long-standing reputation. The Royal Air Force eventually fenced off parts of the site, whether it was trauma imprinted on the land or something stranger. RAF Montrose became a real-world glitch where time didn't play by the rules.
So in 2016, a team of archaeologists in Mongolia made a strange discovery. It was a 1500-year-old mummy buried in the Altai Mountains. The body was impressively well preserved, but what really set off the internet were the shoes. People swore they looked exactly like a pair of modern Adidas sneakers. Observe the black stripes, the overall sporty design. Photos of the find started popping up online, and of course, the time travel talk began. Were they serious? For the most part, no. Were a few people serious though? Yeah. Probably. Why would someone from over 1,000 years ago be wearing something that looked like it came straight from a footlocker? People said. What the hell is footlocker? Said the Zoomers. Is that like jail for people's feet? Or MMA move? I'm not crazy, right? Like, there's not as many footlockers as there used to be. Anyway, even if it wasn't Adidas, the style was bizarrely modern. Well, that's when the experts stepped in, and by that I do not mean footlocker employees, I mean archaeologists and historians who addressed the issue at hand, or should I say issue at foot. And they said, no, these are not Adidas. Stripes were apparently part of traditional Mongolian stitching, and the shape of the shoe was just, I don't know, a coincidence, I guess. According to researchers, it wasn't meant to look like a sneaker, it just aged in a way that made it look familiar to us now. This is what Mike Tyson used to look like before his face tattoo. This is footage from his 1995 boxing match with Peter McNeely, but when you slow it down and zoom in on a guy sitting ringside, something looks kinda out of place. Someone looks like they're holding up something that looks exactly like a smartphone, filming vertically, which is weird because it's 1995. Phones like that just didn't exist yet. The first smartphones were still years away, and the first phones with video cameras were even further off. But this guy is clearly holding something slim and rectangular. You can even see a lens glint in the light, like it's catching the action. So what was it? Well, some say it was just a camcorder, but camcorders in the mid-90s were clunky, didn't hold them like a phone. Others say maybe it was a prototype. I don't know. I think the most probable answer, though, is that someone who was so distraught over his fight with Jake Paul, or whatever you want to call that, I don't even know if it was a fight, but in their desperation, they were somehow able to craft a working time machine, using it to, of course, travel back to the mid-90s to see Mike Tyson right after he got out of prison. It's an odd time to choose, not quite his prime, but he was still winning fights. Regardless, though, if you're going to go back in time, you're not going to leave your cell phone behind, right? So this one comes from a 1938 video. It's quick, but take a look at the woman who has her hand to her ear. Notice something? It really looks like she's talking on a cell phone, doesn't it? Now, obviously, that makes zero sense. Cell phones weren't a thing for another 60 years, so of course people started tossing around their theories. Aside from people debunking it, though, there are really only two theories people have: that this chick's either a time traveler, or this is a case of some sort of glitch in reality. Like whatever computer overlord is controlling our reality accidentally added a cell phone to a video supposedly shot long before they were invented. Makes sense to me, but the official explanation is more boring. Interesting in its own way, though. So a woman came forward years later claiming that it was her great aunt in the footage. According to her, a factory she was working at had an experimental communications division, and the workers were testing out wireless radios. That's supposedly what this woman was holding, a two-way radio prototype. Kinda cool. But if that technology was available in 1938, why did it take another half-century to get mobile phones into people's hands? I don't know, I just make videos about sea monsters and ghosts. The hell do I know, really? Cell phones are all over this list. Seems like this is the only way to tell if someone's traveled back in time and showed up on camera. So this one comes from a behind-the-scenes video that was included as a bonus feature for Charlie Chaplin's 1928 movie, The Circus. It shows people arriving for the film's premiere. It's street footage outside the theater in Los Angeles. But if you look closely, there's a woman walking by in the background doing something very weird for 1928. She's holding something up to her ear, and she's talking into it, like she's on a cellular telephone. Filmmaker George Clark posted the clip online back in 2010, and he called it Chaplin's Time Traveler. The mainstream explanation is that she's using an early hearing aid. Apparently those did exist in the late 20s, and some of them had to be held up to the ear like that. News to me. In 1923, the Brazilian village of Rio Verde was reportedly discovered completely abandoned. A passing group came across the town and found schools with desks neatly lined up, homes with food left on tables, and weapons stacked carefully in public buildings. But not a single person was there. The population, which once numbered around 600, had seemingly vanished overnight. Government records on the incident are thin, but newspaper clippings from the time confirm this discovery. Unlike other famous disappearances, Rio Verde never returned to the maps. It just ceased to exist. Some researchers suggest the townspeople fled from bandits or political violence. Others think the entire population walked into some other dimension altogether, leaving behind a ghost town that is just frozen in time. The Dyatlov Pass is often remembered as Russia's greatest mystery, but the Kamar-Daban Mountains hide a tragedy just as strange. So in 1993, a group of 7 hikers, led by instructor Ludmila Korovina, set out on a trek through the mountains. Suddenly, 6 of them got ill in a really horrifying fashion. They screamed, they tore off their clothing, they vomited BLOOD, and they collapsed. Only one survivor staggered back to safety, incoherent with shock. The official explanation is that it was hypothermia or exhaustion, but the symptoms don't really seem to match. Locals claim the mountains are cursed and that certain areas contain dangerous invisible zones. Conspiracy theorists argue that the hikers stepped into a toxic pocket or an energy field that doesn't belong to our reality, a place where even the air itself was lethal. In the barren desert outside Las Cruces sits a place that locals refuse to visit after sunset, a stretch of land known as the Devil's Playground. From a distance, it looks like any other patch of sand and scrub, but people who wander into it often describe eerie and unsettling experiences. Hikers will report sudden time distortion, strange shifts in light, and a creeping sense of disorientation, as if the land itself is tilting under them. Compasses fail, watches stop. Some people claim that they feel like they're being pulled in different directions at once. One of the most disturbing cases involves a group of campers who set up their tents on the edge of the playground. According to 2 survivors, their friend stepped away from the campfire to relieve himself, only walking a few yards into the desert. Moments later, he was gone. The men searched frantically and discovered his footprints in the sand, but they ended in the middle of open desert, as if he'd been lifted straight into the air. There were search parties, but no trace of him was ever recovered. In 1872, lumber workers boarded a small steamer heading upriver on the Rupert River in Quebec. Witnesses on shore claimed they saw the boat disappear into a heavy fog and never came back. When authorities searched downstream, there was no wreckage, no bodies, and no trace of the vessel. Later expeditions reported finding a patch of river that felt wrong, unnaturally still, quiet. Compasses spun wildly near it, refusing to settle. Locals began to say the boat and its crew had crossed over into another world. Fishermen to this day avoid the bend, warning that anyone who lingers there too long might vanish, just like the men aboard that lost steamer.
You think your last walk home was odd? In January 1950, Miss E.F. Smith left a cocktail party somewhere in Scotland, and during what should have been an uneventful walk, she claimed she saw torchlit figures digging bodies in the snow. Her mind said Pictish warriors from the 7th century. She insisted that she was fully conscious, not dreaming, and watched as these figures worked in the dark dark and cold, moving bodies, turning them over, then continuing onward. The scene felt ancient and violent. When dawn broke and she made it back to modern streets, she described being emotionally shaken for days. That case stands out because she wasn't drifting into a prettier past. She claimed to witness something gruesome and real in an unexpected zone of time. In the early 1970s, 3 men working for a cattle feed company in Oklahoma, Carl, Mark, and Gordon, were sent to retrieve a feeder from a remote pasture near Ponca City. They claimed that on the first night they saw a large 2-story white house near a barn, silent and unlit. The next night they went back. The house was gone. No foundations, no rubble, nothing remained. They swore it wasn't demolished in the interim, just vanished entirely. What makes this case intriguing is that all 3 men confirm the same odd memory and the very stark disappearance. Was that White House a ghost from another time, or did they slip into a timeline where that house still stood? You're driving along a familiar route and suddenly a junction you know should be there just isn't. That's exactly what one motorist claims happened to him somewhere between Hawkshead and Coniston in the Lake District of England. He says that he drove past the spot several times, turned around, retried, but that turning, signposts, the map route, all vanished. Instead, an unbroken stretch of hedgerows, meadows, and emptiness stretched where the junction should exist. He knew the route well. He knew there should be a turning, yet that day reality had removed it. Eventually, he reached Coniston by a massive detour. Some treat this as a spatial illusion, but time slip enthusiasts see it as a moment when roads and time itself rearranged. On a bus tour through the French countryside, some tourists spotted an elegant, old-fashioned hotel. They asked the driver to stop, disembarked, walked into the lobby, chatted briefly, and stayed the night. But when the bus returned the next day to pick them up, nothing was there. The road, the building, the hotel, they all vanished. What's more, locals in the area claimed they never knew of a hotel in that location. Photographs the tourists took were fuzzy or failed to develop properly. The whole thing feels like a pop-in from another time. To this day, it's just one of those was it real stories that vanished just as quickly as they appeared. One night, 2 young women set out to walk a few miles to a village dance. The road twisted, the darkness thickened, and they suddenly found themselves in a landscape they did not recognize. A terrain that felt older, wilder, more primitive. They struggled to cross fields and woods that seemed misaligned with familiar paths. When dawn approached, they re-emerged onto known territory, but in between, they say they passed through terrain that no one alive seemed to know existed. No maps, no signs, just a forgotten sliver of land. Some say they walked through a hidden fold in time, landing briefly in an alternate geography.
Did a man somehow teleport onto this road in Russia? Take a look at this. It's always Russia, isn't it? I don't know why so much bizarre footage comes out of there, but this is a very strange video. I just don't understand where this guy appeared from and how he didn't get pancaked by that truck. Makes no sense. Slowing the video down though, I don't know, maybe it looks like he was already walking on the road and the truck was just blocking our view of him, and then it does this insane swerve to avoid hitting him, but even still, this is crazy. I mean, it really does look like he just spawns out of nowhere like a video game, and whatever the explanation, he was definitely an inch from death. This one comes from a photo taken in... I'm sorry, editor. Just gonna have to insert the name in text here. This place is in Iceland. It's 1943. Nothing out of the ordinary here, right? Just a bunch of people standing around the street dressed in typical 1940s attire, but let's play some Where is Waldo? Can you spot a dude talking on a cell phone? See the guy leaning against the building? Interesting indeed. He's dressed more casually than everyone else, almost modern. I mean, he's wearing a trench coat, but modern. He's holding something up to his ear though, like he's on a phone call. Now, obviously flip phones weren't a thing in 1943, so what's this lad here doing? Was he just checking or adjusting a pipe by listening to it? Was he scratching his face with something? Absolutely not. Don't be ridiculous. This fool was talking on a cell phone. He didn't think yours truly would notice, but I did. I did. Sue me. Honestly though, it really does look like someone using a cell phone. Like a guy who stepped out to take a call, you know, during a street fair or something. There's a short film from the UK that was shot in the early 1940s. It shows a bunch of people relaxing on a beach Got kids building sandcastles, there's people reading newspapers, but right in the middle of the frame, this one guy walks through holding something. And yes, sorry for the lack of variety here, but it really looks like this man has a cell phone or some other modern piece of technology. But instead of talking on it, looks like he's texting. At least that's what a bunch of people online have said. He just looks weirdly modern and out of place. The suit probably has something to do with it. I don't think I've ever seen someone in a suit and tie at the beach. Maybe Doctor Who? But what does Doctor Who do? I don't know, you tell me. I'm Star Trek all the way, but I think he has time traveled. In 2008, a team of archaeologists in China opened what was supposed to be a completely sealed tomb, untouched for about 400 years. As they carefully went through the site, they found something on the floor, a small metal object that looked like a watch. Wasn't an ancient sundial or a decorative bracelet or something. This was an actual modern-looking watch. The time was stuck at 10:06, and the back of it was engraved with the word Swiss. Now, a find like this makes no sense. Wristwatches weren't invented until long after the tomb was sealed, and while Switzerland is definitely known for watches today, the idea that a Swiss-branded watch somehow ended up in a centuries-old Chinese tomb was very odd, to say the least. So, yes, some believe this was a case of someone slipping into the past and leaving behind their watch before returning to their own time. So this is Greta Thunberg, and this is not Greta Thunberg, apparently. That's because this photo was taken in 1898 during the Klondike Gold Rush. The similarity is uncanny though. She even has the same braid, same serious expression. Suffice to say, this photo blew up online. Some took it as a joke, calling her a time traveler sent back to warn us, but there are totally people out there who fully believe Greta's part of a secret government time travel program. What do you all think? And of course, we gotta talk about this one. This photo was taken in 1941 at the reopening of the South Fork Bridge in British Columbia. It's your typical black and white historical image. Everyone's standing around in old-fashioned coats and hats and suits, except for one guy. One dude looks like he walked straight out of a college campus in the 2000s. He's wearing what looks like a modern sweater with a graphic tee underneath and sunglasses. He's also holding a small camera that seems pretty compact for the time. He sticks out so badly, it's almost like someone photoshopped him in. But that's not the case here. Forums and YouTube videos started popping up, calling him the time-traveling hipster. But of course, there's always someone ready to kill the vibe. Debunkers pointed out that the sunglasses were actually around in the 20s and 30s. The printed t-shirt is likely just a sweater with a Stitch logo, yada yada. And while the camera does look modern, compact cameras apparently did exist then. They just weren't super common, but I don't know. Amelia Earhart's disappearance is one of the most famous unsolved mysteries of all time. In 1937, she set off on a mission to become the first woman to fly around the world. But on July 2nd, her plane vanished somewhere over the Pacific Ocean. The last radio transmission from her reported she was running low on fuel near Howland Island, and then nothing. The massive search that followed turned up nothing, and Earhart and her navigator Fred Noonan were declared lost at sea. That's the official story, but over the years, people have reported strange sightings and theories that suggest she might not have died in a crash. Some claim she was captured by the Japanese and held as a prisoner of war. Others believe she assumed a new identity and lived out her days in secrecy. Some claim to have actually spotted her with their own eyes, and in 2017, a supposed long-lost photograph surfaced from US military archives and was shared online. Some said there was a woman looking a lot like Earhart and a man who could be Noonan on a dock in the Marshall Islands. In Sydney, Australia, in 1987, Gabriel Noga went out to run errands like any normal day. He even called his wife Pamela, saying that he'd be home for lunch, but he never showed up. Pamela called the police, and soon after, a disturbing discovery was made. Gabriel's car was found burned out on the side of the road, and there was no sign of Gabriel himself. There was a massive search, but the case quickly went cold. That is, until 2 weeks later, when police discovered someone had withdrawn money from Gabriel's account over 100 miles away. But after that, the trail went dead again for 20 years. Right before Gabriel was about to be declared legally dead, one final search by a determined constable led to a shocking discovery. A man in Mackay had recently undergone surgery. His name was Ron Saunders, but hospital records showed that he also went by Gabriel Noga. When authorities contacted him, he told them that he had barely remembered the last 2 decades. He'd been living on the streets, doing odd jobs with only fragments of memory from his past life. Doctors suspected that he'd suffered severe head trauma in the accident that burned out his car, leading to a rare case of amnesia. But something didn't quite add up. If he still knew his name, why hadn't he tried to find his family? Why not contact the police? Well, whatever the answer, the family was reunited in the end. What would you do if you realized your work could be used for something catastrophic? In the case of Italian physicist Ettore Majorana, he might have chosen to vanish. In 1938, Majorana, a brilliant scientist working on cutting-edge atomic research, boarded a ship from Palermo to Naples, but when the ship arrived, he was nowhere to be found. Witnesses confirmed that he'd gotten on the boat, but no one saw him get off. There were no reports of foul play either, and the weather had been calm. For years, people wondered if he'd been kidnapped, killed, fled into hiding. It wasn't until 2011 that a new clue finally came about. A photograph taken in Argentina in the 50s of a man who looked exactly like Majorana. Facial recognition experts found 10 points of similarity, meaning it was very likely him, but he barely looked like he'd aged. The leading theory is that Majorana, realizing his work on neutrinos could be used for nuclear weapons, deliberately disappeared. Some believe he may have even worked on early atomic research before realizing the implications and choosing to disappear and start over. But to this day, we still can't say for sure. On May 25th, 1985, police in Aurora, Colorado were called to a shopping mall about a woman in distress. She had no ID, no memory of who she was, and was carrying only an empty notepad and a car key. She was taken to a hospital where she spent 4 months trying to piece together her past, even reaching out to local news outlets for help, but nothing turned up. With no answers, she decided to start fresh. She changed her name to Jane D and moved to Alaska, where she built a whole new life, marrying, having 2 sets of twins, and settling down. 12 years passed, and that's when a co-worker of hers happened to see a news broadcast from Seattle about a missing woman named Jody Roberts. The photo was unmistakable. Jane D was Jody Roberts, an investigative journalist who had disappeared from Washington State in 1985. But what happened? How had she completely forgotten who she was? Long-term amnesia this severe is usually caused by extreme trauma or an epileptic event. Roberts had no history of epilepsy, and before vanishing, she'd emptied her bank account and taken her cats to a shelter. It looked like she'd planned to disappear, but to this day, the truth's never come out. She still goes by Jane D and is intensely private of person, not interested in speaking to the press. She has no social media. It does make you wonder though, if something happened, something to do with her journalism job that made her feel the need to get away. A man named Russ Kellett from North Yorkshire, England, came out with some pretty wild claims a few years back, and when various news sites told his story online, some people just memed the hell out of him, others were absolutely giddy. The story is pretty insane, but it is also pretty entertaining, and I'll just say, I'd love it to be real. So Kellett says that he's been taken by aliens at least 60 times. That's 60. Starting when he was just a boy. He describes waking up in a strange tunnel-like space, then finding himself on an operating table surrounded by towering Dracula-like beings who pumped a mysterious liquid into his body, supposedly turning him into a super soldier. For over 30 years, Kellett insists he's been part of an alien military force fighting against a race known as the Dragos, massive reptilian creatures with dragon-like heads. He says time moves differently in this war, with 4 hours on Earth equaling 4 years on distant planets, and that he's been battling not just in space, but here on Earth too, in places like the UK, other parts of Europe and South America. He even claims to have been transported through time, using a strange glass sphere inside a room with a chessboard patterned floor, sent to fight in conflicts across the universe. And I will just leave it at that.
This is a more intimate, personal claim rather than one in the newspaper. The author of The Carolinians Archives claims that, as a child in Georgia, he and his family often visited an old motel restaurant south of Interstate 85. Years later, when he tried to revisit it, the motel was gone, replaced by strip malls and fast food. But he also claims episodes of time-slip recollections tied to that place. Odd dreams, fleeting ghost doors, night visions of doors that open in impossible ways, places shifting behind walls. He says the place in memory sometimes feels more real than the modern version, as if the motel had flickered between eras. It's the kind of weird personal anomaly that makes you question how much of your memory is tied to time itself. Another story from travelers. A bus carrying tourists was driving, and passengers saw an elegant, welcoming hotel on the horizon. The bus stopped, people got off, walked in to ask, spent time inside, but when the bus retraced that route minutes later, the hotel was gone. The road it had been alongside looked different. Some tourists claimed windows, doors, elegant lobbies, but others saw nothing. It's similar to other disappearing hotel stories, but more dramatic because it involves a moving group, not just one or two people. The shared witness aspect definitely adds some weight to this very weird story. In 1957, 3 British naval cadets on training duty reportedly stumbled into a silent, deserted medieval village in Suffolk. They saw houses that looked centuries old, heard church bells that then stopped abruptly, saw no modern wires or features, and felt an oppressive silence. No bird song, no wind. After about 25 minutes, the scene snapped back and they were once more surrounded by modern surroundings. Cars, wires, and countryside. The villagers later confirmed that no such remote medieval village had existed in that precise place in recorded history. It's definitely just a classic ghost village in time scenario. In the 1970s in Great Yarmouth, England, a man claimed to enter a shop to buy envelopes. The assistant was dressed in Edwardian style, the prices were ludicrously low, and the whole place felt stuck in the past. A few weeks later, he returned and the shop was modern, with standard merchandise, and the assistant wore modern clothes. What's odd is that the envelopes he bought were types that had ceased production years earlier. That implies that either he slipped into a time when those envelopes were still sold, or the shop had become a mini time capsule for a moment. It's a small case, but one that lingers in odd collections of time slip lore. This one is a little bit more recent, and this one comes from Reddit. A family staying in a motel in the US in the Utah region claimed they experienced something bizarre. The sun set, they began dinner, then fireworks burst in the distance, except their clocks read 7 p.m. Within minutes, their phones jumped to 12:15 a.m. All family members report confusion. The kids thought they were early, the parents tried to rationalize it as clock malfunction, but every phone, every watch jumped to the future at once. Afterward, the world looked night dark, as if hours had passed. Whether this was a glitch in perception, a mass hallucination, or something even more bizarre, it remains one of those weird, personal anomalies that people whisper about in paranormal forums. Now, this first case is very, very strange. In 1880, a farmer named David Lang reportedly vanished into thin air while walking across a field on his property near Gallatin, Tennessee. There were multiple witnesses, including his wife, his 2 children, and 2 visitors arriving in a horse-drawn buggy. They said Lang was mid-step when he literally just disappeared. There was no flash of light, he hadn't fallen or gone behind a tree, he was there 1 second, and then he wasn't. The group ran to where he'd been standing, expecting to find a sinkhole or some kind of trap in the ground, but the earth was solid. They searched the area for days. Neighbors joined in, but no sign of Lang was ever found. The only thing that changed was the grass where he had vanished. It turned sort of like it decayed. It turned yellow and brittle, and for years afterward, nothing would grow there. Then, months later, Lang returned. sort of. His daughter was playing in a field looking for four-leafed clovers, and that's when she heard it. A voice that sounded a lot like her father, calling for help. It was faint, like it was coming from underground or from behind a wall. It happened more than once, but each time they checked, there was still nothing. Eventually, even the voice stopped. The story was pretty well known at the time. It showed up in the newspaper, and the names, place, and details were consistent with public records. Was it fabricated? Maybe, but everyone there that day remained adamant about what they saw. In 2006, Carol Chase McKelney was driving through Riverside County, California, on her way home from a dog show. As she passed through her old hometown of Riverside, she figured she'd take a quick detour to see the neighborhood she grew up in. It had been years since she visited, and she was curious to see how much it had changed. Except, it wasn't her town. The street names were right, the general layout looked familiar, but her childhood home was completely gone, and so were all of the houses around it. The neighborhood had totally changed, like it had been wiped out and replaced with strange, unfamiliar buildings. She went to look for her grandmother's house. Gone too. Her old school was nowhere to be found. Even the cemetery where several family members were buried didn't look the same. The graves were different, and the whole place just felt wrong, like a dream version of her hometown. Completely shook, she got out of there, and it wasn't until years later that she felt the courage to come back. But this time, everything was normal. Her grandmother's house was there, her childhood home too, the school, everything was just like it always had been. So, what happened? Carol was completely sober, not tired, not on medication. She knew what she saw and what she didn't see. She swore up and down that for a few strange hours, she stepped into some alternate version of her hometown, a place almost like hers, but not quite. In 1978, 23-year-old Stephen Kubacki was a college student studying German at Hope College in Michigan. One February afternoon, he went cross-country skiing near Lake Michigan and never came back. The next day, his skis and backpack were found near the edge of the frozen lake. There were footprints leading out onto the ice, and then nothing. Search and rescue teams looked for weeks, but no trace of him was ever found. Everyone assumed the same thing, that he had fallen through the ice and died. Except, 15 months later, he showed up. Stephen woke up on a grassy hill in a field in Pittsfield, Massachusetts, over 700 miles away from where he disappeared. He was wearing clothes he didn't recognize, with a satchel full of maps he didn't remember collecting. He had a t-shirt from a marathon in Wisconsin, which he didn't recall running, and his last memory was being on the ice. He walked to his aunt's house nearby, and from there eventually reconnected with his parents. Nobody had seen or heard from him in a year and 3 months, but all things considered, he looked healthy. He was just confused like everybody else. When asked what happened, Stephen said he had no idea. He didn't remember anything. It was like someone had hit a reset button on his brain. To this day, he still doesn't talk much about it, and after the incident, he went back to school, earned a degree, and eventually became a clinical psychologist, which is kind of wild considering he's got one of the strangest unsolved disappearance stories on record. But I guess also maybe that makes him the perfect person for the job, you know? In March of 2017, Bruno Borges, a 24-year-old psychology student from Brazil, vanished without a trace. His family had last seen him at their home in Rio Branco, and when they realized he hadn't taken his phone, wallet, or anything useful for a getaway, they went into his locked bedroom. And that is when things got really strange. The entire room had been turned into some kind of cryptic research lab. The furniture was gone, replaced with a giant statue of a 16th century philosopher who believed in infinite worlds and extraterrestrials. There were also pages and pages of handwritten text covering the walls, floor to ceiling. Over 14 books worth written in a bizarre code nobody could read. Bruno's family had no idea any of this was going on. He'd apparently been working on it in secret for months. When news about his disappearance came out, internet sleuths obsessed over his case. His encrypted writings were eventually partially decoded. They talked about personal evolution, contact with higher beings, and preparing humanity for something bigger. But still, no one knew where he went. But after 5 months of silence, Bruno showed up back home, barefoot. He wouldn't say much about where he'd been, only that he'd been working on his ideas. His family and police said he was in good health, mentally stable, and not on any substances. He didn't really give interviews, and most of the public still doesn't know why he left or what exactly he was trying to do. In 1935, British Royal Air Force officer Victor Goddard was flying a biplane over an abandoned airfield near Edinburgh, Scotland. I think that's how you say it, and everyone in the comments is gonna be like, that's not how you say it. Well, I'm not Scottish, so I don't know what you want me to do. The place was falling apart, overgrown with weeds, buildings crumbling, not a soul in sight. A few days later, he flew the same route again, but this time, something was off. As he approached the airfield, a sudden storm hit. Thick, swirling clouds, heavy rain, turbulence. Then, just as fast, the sky cleared. Everything looked brighter. Unnaturally so. The airfield below was no longer abandoned, the buildings were intact, freshly painted, planes were on the ground, yellow ones, which wasn't the standard RAF color at the time, and mechanics in blue overalls were moving around, working on them. None of this made sense in 1935. The colors, the uniforms, the specific model of aircraft he saw, they weren't part of the Air Force yet. When he told people what he'd seen, they thought he was just confused or mistaken. But a few years later, during World War II, that same airfield was brought back to life. It was restored, the planes were painted yellow, and the mechanics wore blue coveralls, just like Goddard had described. It was as if he had seen the future. No one could explain it then, and no one really can now, and Goddard wasn't some nut. He was an air marshal. Dead serious, no nonsense, and he swore up and down till his death that this actually happened.
From a now deleted Reddit user comes an odd encounter at a gas station. Back in 2016, I was driving home late at night after visiting a friend. It was a route I knew well, just a long stretch of highway with barely any traffic at that hour. About halfway home, I noticed a gas station up ahead. The thing is, I didn't remember ever seeing one there before. It didn't look new either, it looked old, like straight out of the 80s. Flickering neon lights, a beat up old truck parked out front. It even had an old school gas pump. Well, I needed gas anyway, so I pulled in. Plus, there was just no way I wasn't checking this place out. The moment I stepped out of my car, everything felt off. Inside, there was an old man behind the counter staring at a tiny TV. I asked if they took cards, but he just shook his head. Cash only. I didn't have cash, so I turned around to leave. As soon as I made it back to my car, it struck me just how weird this situation was. An old gas station that I'd never seen before along a stretch of road I'd driven down plenty of times that apparently only took cash. I shuddered a little and then drove home and tried not to think about the experience before writing it down today. Honestly, I still don't know where I stopped that night or maybe even when. In 1975, Travis Walton and his logging crew were driving home after a long day working in the Apache Site-Greaves National Forest when they spotted something very bizarre. A glowing red light hovering over the trees. As they got closer, they saw what looked like a metallic craft suspended in midair. Most people would hit the gas and get out of there, but Walton had other ideas. Ignoring his crew's warnings, he got out of the truck and walked toward it. And that's when a beam of light shot down from the craft, knocking him off his feet, lifting him into the air. That was enough for the rest of the crew. They panicked and sped off. Guilt quickly set in though, and they decided to turn back. But when they returned a few minutes later, Walton was gone. A massive search followed, but no sign of Walton turned up for 5 days. Suddenly though, he reappeared. Confused and disoriented, he ended up telling everyone eventually that he'd been taken aboard a UFO, where he encountered strange beings that seemed to be experimenting on him. He claimed he managed to fight them off and escape deeper into the ship before waking up on the side of the road with no idea how much time had passed. The case became one of the most well-documented alien abduction stories in history, probably, especially since Walton and his crew all passed multiple polygraph tests. This next case, often referred to as the friendship case, might not fit the typical missing person story, but it's got a weird, unsettling angle that connects to the idea of people vanishing, at least temporarily, and coming back with some pretty wild stories. It's not going to go where you think it's going to go. So, during a stretch of time between the 1950s and 60s, a group of people in Italy claimed that they were regularly in contact with extraterrestrial beings. They were supposedly peaceful, highly advanced, and deeply invested in guiding humanity toward a better future. According to those involved, the aliens would take them to hidden bases on Earth, sharing advanced knowledge about science and spirituality, and the importance of unity. Some claim to have spent significant time with these beings, and as if this whole thing wasn't strange enough, some believe that in the course of these interactions, a few of the humans may have gotten a little too close to their extraterrestrial friends, possibly leading to the birth of alien-human hybrids. Now, obviously, this is a pretty nutty case, no pun intended, but if this story is to be believed, we've got a situation where ordinary people vanished, at least for short periods, and were taken to who knows where. Apparently, though, they came back changed. This next story comes from another now deleted Reddit user and goes as follows. In 2019, I went on a solo hiking trip in Washington. It was a well-traveled trail, nothing dangerous. I planned to camp overnight and head back the next morning. Around 1 p.m., I set up camp in a clearing, and that's when things got weird. I noticed that the forest was silent. There were no birds to be heard, no wind, just this heavy stillness. The sky had also changed. It wasn't dark, but the light had this washed out grayish tint. I was uneasy at this point, but decided it just wasn't enough to get too freaked out about. Maybe a storm was coming. Well, then about an hour later, I heard the voices, muffled like a bad recording of human speech. I stuck my head out of my tent expecting to see someone, but the clearing was empty. Now, I must have fallen asleep soon after this because I don't remember much after that. But when I woke up, the clearing looked different. The trees seemed taller, the air was heavy. At this point, I was just freaked out and decided it was time to head home. Thing is, the trail was missing. At least I couldn't find it. I walked for hours in the direction I'd come, but I never seemed to get anywhere. It was actually getting dark now. Finally, I made it out though and reached my car. I checked the time, and that's when I lost it. Less than 2 hours had passed? This was impossible. I could have sworn I was out there for 5 hours. Well, I haven't gone down that trail since, and I never will again. In August of 1976, 4 friends set out for a camping trip in the Allagash Wilderness in Maine, hoping for some peaceful time away. But things took a strange turn when they spotted a bright light in the sky on their second night, which then quickly disappeared. 2 nights later, the same light appeared again, only this time it was much more intense. In fact, they described it looking almost like the sun. As they watched, it followed them along the water. One of the men, Charlie, tried to signal SOS using his flashlight, and that's when the light shot a beam toward him. When they returned to camp, everything felt off. The fire they'd left burning was out, and they were completely drained as if hours had passed. Days went by without any other strange sightings, but when the men got home, they began having these unsettling dreams, all of them similar and terrifying. It wasn't until 1988 that they finally sought help from UFO researcher Ray Fowler and decided to undergo hypnosis. Under hypnosis, they all recalled being abducted by aliens, terrifying creatures who performed medical exams on them and even took their skin and bodily fluids. What was most chilling was that each of their stories matched almost perfectly, and they even passed polygraph tests. From Reddit user Flamingo comes an unsettling experience with an answering machine. It goes as follows. This happened about 15 years ago. I called my friend up and he wasn't home, so I left a message on his answering machine. I said, "Hey, it's me, kill all extremists. Sorry, I missed you. Call you later. Bye," and then hung up and left the house. I made no other calls. Later that day, he calls me back and he says, "Wow, that was quite a message you left. Who was that girl you were talking to?" I was like, "What are you talking about? I wasn't talking to any girl." Well, as it turns out, the message didn't end after I said bye. I had to go over to his house and listen to this message a few times. After my initial message that I did leave, there was a slight pause, and then it continues on for another 30 to 40 seconds or so, with me talking to some girl. It was my voice, but a conversation I never had with a girl whose voice I did not recognize. You could compare it to the message I know I did leave. The 2 voices were indistinguishable. Not just the voice, but, the talking mannerisms. It was my voice. Also, references to my occupation and activities were the same. Basically, in this conversation, I was talking to this girl about going skiing, but I had to go down to my shop and work on a car first, which totally correlated to me. Then the message just stopped. It was recorded on one of those digital answering machines that records the message to a chip, so there was no tape I could have taken and analyzed, unfortunately. Also, I nor my friend had party lines, so that's not an explanation. It was very freaky. I can't explain it. Back in the summer of 1968, two teenagers working at a summer camp in Vermont, 16-year-old Michael Lapp and 19-year-old Janet Carnell, were just hanging out by the dock, watching the sun set over Lake Champlain. Most of the camp was empty because the kids were away at a swim meet. Pretty peaceful scene, but it didn't last. Michael spotted a weird light in the sky. At first he figured it was just a star, but then it suddenly dropped and started coming toward them. Soon, three smaller lights broke off from the main glow and started zigzagging over the water in ways no plane or helicopter could. The lights got closer, formed a triangle, and then one dove straight into the lake. Michael described the sound that followed like a, quote, 1,000 tuning forks, which is such an oddly specific comparison to make. Then he noticed a transparent dome on the craft, and inside were what he described as two childlike creatures with big heads, long necks, and huge eyes. The craft shot a beam at them, so Michael grabbed Janet and pulled her down as they felt themselves begin floating into the air. The next thing they knew, they were back sitting on the dock. But it was much later. Both were disoriented, and Janet seemed almost in a trance. Years later, Michael started having recurring nightmares, always about being taken. He recalled being inside the ship, seeing Janet examined, looking up through the dome at Earth and the stars. Janet later recalled the event, describing it almost exactly as Michael had, only she hadn't spoken to him in years. Researcher Walter Webb eventually concluded that the two had, quote, no opportunity for collusion, and that they'd experienced a, quote, real external event of unknown origin. Reddit user MissPack01 had a very odd experience with a school assignment. They write, I'm going to college in British Columbia, Canada, and I'm taking a business class. So first week of February, our teacher talks about an assignment that'll be due March 2nd. It's a 3-page paper with references on something we've learned in the class. That night he posts a little thing about due date and expectation and formatting, blah blah blah. I start the paper early to get it out of the way, but of course, life and work get in the way, so I forget about it for a week. Fast forward to yesterday's class and I start freaking out about the assignment. I go to my folder on the computer and it's not there for some reason. Oh no, maybe I forgot to save. Unlikely, but possibly. So when I get to class, I ask him if he wants it submitted online, because I didn't see a Dropbox, or handed in physically on Monday. Here's where it gets weird. He doesn't have a clue what I'm talking about. Says there never was any assignment. I got him to look on the course site where he posted the outline and nothing was there. I asked a couple classmates and nobody had a clue what I was talking about either. This is so weird. I'm only taking 2 classes as I work full time, so no, I did not get the assignment mixed with another class. In the last month, did I somehow walk through a door to another universe? Well, I can't tell you for sure, Redditor, but if I switched to a parallel universe that meant everything stayed normal, but I no longer had homework due, I would count that as a win. This one comes from a Redditor named Carla Ray 14, and if the title of the post, I'm convinced my parallel universe self was speaking to my family, doesn't creep you out already, then just listen to this. So about 5 years before she made the post, Carla's parents and 2 sisters were traveling around Europe. She stayed home with her husband and their baby. Well, one night at 3 a.m. her phone starts ringing. It's her dad. She ignores it at first, thinking maybe he forgot about the time difference, but then it rings again and again. When she finally checks her phone, she sees a dozen missed calls and a pile of messages from her family, all saying things like, everything will be okay, we're going to get the next flight home to be with you, stay strong, we love you. Completely freaked out, she answers the next call and demands to know what's going on. Her dad, sounding really shaken, tells her, I've just been on the phone with you for an hour. What do you mean, what's going on? He insists that she called him in tears, saying her husband left her after she told him she was pregnant. Carla's husband was literally asleep beside her though. She says, Dad, what are you talking about? He's right here. He hasn't walked out on me, and I'm definitely not pregnant. Her family swore it was her voice on the line though. Even her sister said she talked with Carla during the call, heard a friend in the background, and got details like Carla canceling her dentist appointment, something that was actually true but only her husband knew about. Carla had to send a photo of her and her husband right then and there to prove that nothing happened. To this day, her dad just shakes his head and says, "I don't know what to believe." Is it possible someone was just making a prank call? I mean, I guess maybe, but they guessed a lot of specific details if that's the case. Is it also possible that some version of Carla from a parallel universe managed to call her dad in this one? I don't know. What do you guys think?
In 2008, a woman named Lorena Garcia from Spain woke up and immediately felt something was off. At first, it was little things. Her bed sheets were different, her pajamas weren't the ones she remembered putting on the night before. Confused, she chalked it up to grogginess and just got ready for work. But when she got to the office, the weirdness escalated. She'd been working at the same place for 20 years, but when she arrived, she realized she didn't work in the same department anymore. She was listed under a completely different role, one she swore she'd never been assigned. Her boss, her coworkers, the whole structure was different, but it got worse. She reached out to her ex-boyfriend, who she'd broken up with months earlier, only to find out that they'd never broken up at all. According to him, they were still together. The man she had been dating, who she'd just seen a few days ago, was nowhere to be found. His number didn't even work. It was like he never existed. Lorena genuinely believed she'd woken up in a different version of reality, one nearly identical to her own but with very key differences. She went to doctors, psychologists, everyone she could think of trying to explain what happened, but no one had an answer. She was healthy, her memory was sharp, yet her life didn't match her memories. And to this day, Lorena insists that she's from somewhere else, that she somehow crossed into a parallel dimension and has been stuck here ever since. In May of 1972, 4 girls from Southern Utah University were driving home after a rodeo when they took a shortcut through Gadianton Canyon, near the Utah-Nevada border. Around 10 p.m., the road beneath them changed from black asphalt to smooth white cement. The desert landscape gave way to unfamiliar grain fields and towering pines, not at all what they expected in southern Utah. Thinking they were lost, they turned around. Then they spotted a small roadside tavern and pulled over to ask for directions. Before anyone could get out, one of the girls screamed. Heading towards them were 4 strange egg-shaped vehicles with tricycle-style wheels and glowing lights. The girls, completely panicked, jumped back in the car and tore off through the canyon. As suddenly as it started, the strange scenery disappeared and the road returned to normal. They eventually crashed into a creek, damaging her car and flattening 3 tires. At dawn, they hiked to the highway and flagged down a trooper named Victoria Lindquist, who was shocked and confused to find that their tire tracks ended abruptly 600 feet into the desert. And despite being found miles from the road, no one could explain how they got there. One hubcap was also missing, which was never found. Back in the 1800s, there was a man named William Cantello, an eccentric British inventor obsessed with creating a rapid-fire automatic weapon. After years of work, he told his family he was heading to the market to sell his invention, and he never came back home. Roughly 20 years later, an American inventor named Hiram Maxim rose to fame with, you guessed it, a rapid-fire automatic firearm. Maxim also looked strikingly similar to Cantello, so much so that Cantello's own children were convinced he was their father. The resemblance became such a nuisance that Maxim addressed it in his autobiography, claiming someone had been impersonating him. Now, that may have been the case. It was just a coincidence that he not only looked just like another man, but also took up the same vocation. But some believe Cantello faked his disappearance and took on a new identity, or that Cantello and Maxim were the same person from 2 different realities, and at some point they switched places, leaving both men stuck in the wrong timeline. This has to be one of the strangest missing persons cases that I have ever heard. In 1763, in a quiet English town of Shepton Mallet, a man named Owen Parfett vanished without a trace. He was old, frail, and paralyzed. He couldn't walk, couldn't dress himself, he barely moved. Locals say he was a former sailor with a shady past, but by the time this story takes place, he was basically bedridden. Well, one warm evening, Owen was sitting outside his sister's cottage, propped in a chair, enjoying the breeze. His sister and a neighbor helped him outside, then they went inside for a bit. They claimed they were gone maybe 15 minutes, and when they came back, the chair was there, still facing the road, but Owen was gone. Now, this wasn't a busy area. It wasn't like someone could sneak up, lift a full-grown man who couldn't walk, and then vanish without making a sound, but it seemed like that's exactly what happened. People searched the fields, wells, nearby roads. Nothing. Days passed, then weeks. Rumors spread. Some started to wonder if he'd just been faking the paralysis for years before finally deciding to... what? Wander off into the wilderness alone? I don't know. It's not a good option. The theories? I don't know. I've got no new ones. In 1961, a girl named Terry Jo Duperalt went on what was supposed to be a dream family vacation, a week-long cruise on a rented sailboat in the Bahamas. But just a few days in, everything went horribly wrong. Terry Jo woke up one night to the sound of footsteps and her brother screaming. When she went topside, she found the deck covered in blood. Her mother and brother were dead. The captain, Julian Harvey, was the only adult left standing, and when he saw her, he didn't say a word, he just stared. She went back below deck, terrified. Minutes later, water started flooding in. The boat was sinking. She escaped onto a small floaty and drifted alone for nearly 4 days under the scorching sun. Dehydrated, sunburned, and half-conscious, she was eventually rescued by a Greek freighter. The fact that she survived at all was almost a miracle. Captain Harvey was rescued days earlier in a lifeboat and told authorities that the boat sank in a freak accident. He said that everyone else was lost at sea, but when he found out Terry Jo survived, he took his own life immediately. She never saw him kill her family, but everyone believes that that is exactly what happened, probably for insurance money. Still, there are holes in the story, and what Terry Jo saw that night, she never fully talked about. Some say she blocked it all out, others think something even darker went down. Till this day, though, the case has never really been solved. There is a book about this, if you're interested. I think it's called like Orphan Lost at Sea or something like that. And also, if you're a fan of the podcast MFM, if you know, you know, in one of their recap episodes that they're doing right now, the rewinds, they just did this one like a few weeks ago, so go listen to that, read the book. The story's crazy, you guys. That's just crazy. This little girl's just lost at sea, then she's found, and everything was okay for her. And that's the important part of the story.